obviously, if you guys saw the title, you know that this video is going to be maybe controversial. Obviously, you can't escape having personal bias, right? But I'm gonna try not to offer an answer, not to offer a solution, right? I don't want to be that guy. I don't ever want to be the guy that is claiming that like I know this for certain. At the end of the day, we know almost nothing for certain, truly. But no, I do want to get into it, and I want to give you guys a little bit of background for me. And maybe this is the first video you've seen on my channel, so that's great. But I recently graduated college, and while I was going through college, obviously, and I did a science degree, right? Actually, more specifically, I did entomology, which is the study of insects, arthropods, all of that. It was amazing, and a great experience. But I will say this: I'm a Christian. I've always been a Christian. There was points in my life where I wasn't a Christian, where I didn't really believe, but that's not for this topic. For the most part in my life, have believed in God, right? And whenever I was in college, I believed in God, and so that's kind of why I'm mentioning this. Is whenever I'm in those classes, whenever I'm interacting with the students, a lot of them are atheists. And of course, you expect this, because you are in a scientific major. A lot of them are going to be scientifically based, right? And of course, you can't get mad about this. At the same degree, the professors too, right? And there may be a lot of you watching this who are Christians, right? You are a Christian, but maybe you did a major or a study or a job or whatever, right? And it just didn't really seem that Christianity was mentioned that much, or that people. But anyway, that's beyond the point. Obviously, going back, to what the title is, a lot of what we are taught is evolution, right? And evolution is undeniable. Evolution is undeniable. I mean, if somebody's going to come up to me and be like, Spider-Man, I don't believe in evolution, I would say, okay, let's debate it. And I would immediately say to you, how is it that a whale, right, used to be a terrestrial mammal, right? But it has evolved into the largest non-terrestrial water-based organism on the planet. I mean, genuinely, how does that happen? And obviously, me studying bugs, you look at every bug. I mean, the orchid mantis, for example, looked like a normal mantis way back when. But whenever the orchid, obviously, evolved to looking the way it does, the plant itself, right? The mantis went through several, millions potentially stages of maybe even more stages of genetic mutation. Right, and basically what's happening, if you guys didn't know this, every bug that you look at and you're like, oh, a leaf bug or a stick bug or any kind of bug that's resembling, maybe a plant or a rock or anything like that, the bug didn't just look like that. It had to go through millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of years of evolution because that bug started off not looking anything like that. Right, so another example is like a butterfly. Right, maybe in an area you only have a specific type of flowers, a specific type of foliage, right, and so a butterfly will, maybe have colors that reflect that. Or a praying mantis, going back to the praying mantis, not just the orchid mantis, but for a lot of mantises, they will mimic the background in which they're in, and that wasn't always like that, right? So we ask ourselves, well, obviously, evolution has occurred to an extent, right? But we also believe in God, and if you believe in God, if you grew up in the church, oftentimes what you're told is the Earth is 6,000 years old, that Adam was created from a speck of dust, and it was so immediately. Right, we're told that evolution couldn't exist because of the time scale. 6,000 years doesn't allow anything to happen. Maybe what they'll tell you is that, oh, well, God sped up the process. Okay? We're going to leave that. We're going to put a footnote in that for now. We may come back to it, we may not. But it's interesting, because what I was met with in college and met with in church, right, and they're two dichotomies. They're two very different on the polar opposite ends, but what I was met with the idea that one of them existed and the other one couldn't exist because one of the other existed. Right, so basically what I mean is that from a Christian perspective, right, and I love this topic. Me and my roommate, Norman Osborne, we talk about this topic all the time. It's a fun topic. But anyways, we get into that all the time, where Christians, often don't believe in the course of evolution, right, whereas scientists, a lot of them being atheists, don't believe in the Christianity elements, but do believe in evolution, right, and it's almost as if because of reading the Bible in a very literal context, basically, in my opinion, this is my opinion, misconstrued kind of how that time scale would work. And this is my opinion. This is where I'm going to get into what I think. And again, I want to be very, very clear for anyone watching. That might be like, Spider-Man, you're so much dumber than you look. Guys, I promise, I'm not trying to do that at all. But these are my opinions. So let's start at the very beginning. Right? Obviously, one of the hardest things for an atheist, for scientists to disprove, is the Big Bang. And if it wasn't the Big Bang, it doesn't matter, because where did all of this come from? Right? They'll tell you that it requires an accident, or one coincidence, or phenomenon. Right? But if you believe in God, then it's like, okay, well, God, very clearly in the Bible sets the universe as so. Right? But let's get into Earth, right? Because I'm just Spider-Man. I can't comprehend it at a universal level, but I can comprehend it at the Earth level for sure. Right, the Earth, just like any planet, has to form, and the formation takes a long time. I do believe that the Earth is 4.9 billion years old. Right, and at one point, believe it or not, if you guys didn't know this, at one point there was a body in space, like a big planet, basically a rogue planet. And a rogue planet basically means that it's a planet that does not follow a orbital path. Right, a rogue planet slammed into Earth, around the size of Mars. Right, and because of that, we get the rings around the Earth, which eventually form into what we now know as the moon. That's just amazing to me. But the Earth, it was cooling down. The planet was forming, and then, it smashes right in. Earth, and then right in, and then it creates this wave that shoots all of this matter out. Right, and it's an amazing process. And we got the moon from that. And without the moon, I mean, if you guys don't know anything about what the moon does, it obviously affects the tides, but it affects animals. It gives animals a direction. A lot of animals rely on the moon. A lot of humans have relied on the moon, and so it's what a coincidence. But anyways, and of course the moon being what it is doesn't inherently, if you still are not on the side of theology, you could say whatever. And I'm not trying to argue anything with the moon. I'm just saying that from a scientific standpoint, the creation of the moon is really cool. And from a background standpoint of the Earth, knowing that it was hit by a celestial body is even cooler. Anyways, what's not cool is the idea that another one could hit us, but we're not going to get into that. Okay, so Earth has cooled down. Right, and I don't know really at what point this is. This would have been, I guess, a little over midway, something over 500 million years ago. Right, and I may be wrong about that. It may be around 600 million years, but I want to say that's a little bit too much, but I could be wrong, again. Right, but I do know from a bug standpoint, a lot of them started evolving 500-something million years ago, so so that's kind of what but anyways. Right, so I'm thinking to myself, and it has to be longer if bugs are already around, so I would say 600 million, it's some crazy number, guys. But we ask ourselves, we read the Bible, right, and this is the first one that I'm going to get into, Adam and Eve. Right, we read the Bible, and the Bible states that Adam was created of that of a speck of dust. Right, and then Adam was so, that God rose Adam up from a speck of dust. Well, there's a lot of Christians who will read that, and they literally see, the dirt coming together and forming Adam immediately. I don't necessarily agree with that. Actually, what I think that God created us, it states this clearly in the Bible, in mind, body, and spirit. Right, and if we are created truly in God's mind, body, and spirit, then we must embody an element of his creative ability. And if we embody an element of his creative ability, then let me ask you a question. Has an artist ever gotten a bucket of paint and arranged the paint so that they could throw it at the canvas, and then at the moment that all of the paint hits the canvas, it's done immediately? No. Not if you want to make a beautiful, intricate painting, for sure. Obviously, abstract, whatever, but I'm talking about like a Bob Ross level painting. You could not do that. Right, and I believe that that's the case, because that fundamentally is how God operates too. Right, we have this idea of, 600 million years is so much time. God isn't within time. 600 million years is yesterday, but also 5 days from now for him, and it's also right now. But also it's 2025, and it's existing infinitely. In that sense, from front to back, if you want to view it from a linear timescale. Right, and so an actual painter, an actual artist would spend time and they would make a painting. Whenever they would make this painting, they would spend so much time doing it that there's brushstrokes in there that add a level of detail that nobody else would be able to notice except for the creator, and only just a few who are into something niche enough to pay attention to where these brushstrokes may be. And for those of you, looking at this painting, you may be into rocks, and so you notice it within rocks. For those of you within bugs, you may notice it within bugs. If you're into fish, if you're into nature, if you're into anything. Right, you're going to be a little bit closer to seeing those brushstrokes, and you're going to feel it. You're going to feel like, you're going to wonder to yourself, why do I feel this overwhelming sense of connection, of joy, of love towards this? And if you haven't figured it out yet, that's God, speaking to you, right? But getting back into Adam and Eve, whenever it was, 600, 700 million years, whenever it was, the Earth had single cellular microbial life forms. This is what we believe everything evolved from, single cellular microbial life forms. Right, I'm not going to be that guy that's like putting all of this up on the board, or the screen, sorry, or anything like that. Right, but basically what that is it's what it says. It's a single cellular life form, and we believe that everything evolved from that. That there's became 2 cell life forms, 3, multiplying and eventually evolving into what we have today. Obviously, jellyfish, I believe, are one of the first. So you can look at something that obviously has a decent number of cells in it, but is not nearly as complex as us. Right, but Adam being created from a speck of dust. Well, obviously, whenever the Bible was written, they wouldn't have the verbiage. They wouldn't have the terminology to put Adam actually evolved from what they would perceive to be dust, which is a single cellular microbial life form, something that you cannot really see or can't see at all with your own eye. Dust. Adam was created from a speck of dust. And in the sentence, Adam was created from a speck of dust, there could be hundreds of millions of years. God has the time because God is time. God is. He states that many times. Right? Obviously, with the Adam and Eve thing, again, going back to the analogy, I do not believe that God ever got a bucket full of paint and that's chunked it. Right? God is a creator, and we are his creation, and we like to embody that creativity. Right? And there's an element where anyone who is actually creative and putting their passion into it knows that it takes time, and you want to take that time. You don't want to rush it. You want to put your soul into it, and that comes from God. Right? And whenever we are really getting into the idea that, you can't basically have evolution with Christianity, and you can't have Christianity with evolution. It's like God is not going to put in the Bible in that sentence, oh, by the way, Adam evolved from this. It's derivative. I mean, it truly is. It's derivative. I mean, basically, and this is my opinion again, basically what that would cause is that people would read that and they'd be way more interested in the notion of Adam evolving, right, from whatever it is to whatever it is. Way more interested in that than the idea of Adam simply being. And so by doing that, what you can do is you can just establish Adam, and you don't have to go into that, right? The Bible isn't a book of unfathomable timescales. Obviously, a great historical reference. There's a lot of references in there, but at the end of the day, it's a book of Christ. It's a book for us to take in where we learn about Christ, right? Where we learn about morals, where we learn about, history, but not to that level. Right, the reason, I actually have a video about the whole dinosaur thing and all of that they are mentioned in the Bible, but they're mentioned as dragons. But anyways, again, it's beyond the point. It's just one of those things where you look at evolution, right, and then you take, again, Christianity into it. There hasn't really ever been a point for me where, recently, that is, where I didn't view them basically as a way to understand each other. Not working against each other, but actually they're working parallel, and you can look at them and you can cross reference. Right? Obviously, very clear that humans have gone through some form of evolution. In the Bible, it states that we used to live for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Right? Which would actually make sense on a biological level if there was only a few 100,000 people at the time, maybe. Right, but it also states that God punished us and took away our long health, or our long life, I should say. Sorry. This is interesting too, and there may be theologists who know way more on this subject than me, and I tried, and I don't want to be try to be super wrong whenever I say this, but I do know that there was a point, and I do believe it was after Noah, or during Noah, after the flood, where basically it stated that the human life was punished, the human lifespan, and we went from being able to live 900 years to what we have now. Obviously, and what I'm trying to say is that I think that there's a lot of people who read that and they're like, oh, well, immediately people were only able to live this long, and it's like, well, also, there's a standpoint to look at it where people are populating the earth. As more people are populating the earth, and there's more and more people, it would be less substantial from a biological standpoint to live that long, right? So you get to a point where, again, at a biological level, there is no reason to live this long because there's enough of you. I hope that makes sense. Right? And obviously, we being humans, we're very superstitious. We always have been. And we may take that as, well, God punished us. And that may very certainly be true. Just because something isn't exactly as so, and it may be a little bit of a metaphor, doesn't mean it's not God. Because, again, God is. And honestly, whenever I view science, A lot of people say science is derivative of God. God is derivative of science. I say that science is the way to understand God's handiwork. Right? You look at everything going on, and it is insane. It is unfathomable. There is no way to comprehend the scope of not just our universe, but everything around us. Right? Whether that be the soil, the creatures, our own body. Right? You look everywhere, and there is very, very clearly, in my opinion, a design. Right? And I didn't want to make this video super long, but I just really wanted to come out and say that they can both exist. And I want to make one more point. It's 7 days. Because I brought that up, and I think I left my mind. But I want to bring that up because in the Bible it states that a day is that of 1,000 days is that of a day to God. Right, which is interesting because 1,000 days back in that point, in reference and time scale, would have been almost unfathomable, right? But now 1,000 years to us is like, okay, 1,000 years. But basically, I don't believe that it was literally meaning 1,000 years. I think it was a metaphor alluding to the fact that one day to God can be anything. Right? It says in the Bible that God created the heaven, the earth, and everything in 7 days. This is basically where I believe most Christians, most individuals get hung up on, is the idea of creation in 7 days. But it also states, again, that 1,000 days is that of a day to God. Right? So if that's the case, and if 1,000 days being that of a day to God is actually more of a metaphor alluding to the fact that it's an incomprehensible time scale, that God can exist infinitely in time, and it's always, it can be at any time that he wants it to. And what I mean by all of this is that 7 days, in between those passages of God creating the earth in 7 days, there could have been, and it's estimated, and I don't believe this number can be exactly correct, because how could we be so correct? There'd be a lot of astronomers that would disagree, though. But I do believe that it's 13.8, 13.9 billion years old. That's how old the universe is. That's how old they estimate it to be, right? And obviously, that is way more than 7 days if the Earth is 6,000 years old from their time scale. So what I genuinely actually believe is that, let's say those projections are right. It is 13.8 billion years. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you could imagine that immediately after the events of the Big Bang, for hundreds, for billions of years even, everything is just forming and taking shape, and God is sitting up there and he's just, he's just thinking about everything that he's about to create, right? And he's also creating it simultaneously, and he's, I would imagine putting a lot of effort, and I say time, but it's, again, negated for him. Right, a lot of effort into it, a lot of thought into it, and we see that everywhere in the world, and just our world. And we don't really, obviously, we can look off into the universe, but seeing the scope of it, absolutely not. We have no idea. So, the beauty that is out there, the beauty that God created that He knew that we will never see, right? That, in my opinion, was not done in literally 7 days. That was done in whatever time. Basically, what I mean by that is that let's say it was literally 7 days. Imagine my hand, you have a block of 7 days right here, right? God could, tell the person who was writing this passage specifically that, I created this in 7 days, right? But actually what God means by that is that in those 7 days, the span of billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of years occurred. But he's just... I made it in 7 days, right? Because basically what he's saying is he's simplifying it down to one day I do this, one day I do this, one day I do this. But again, a day is out of, 1,000 years is out of a day, whatever it is. You wonder. I wonder, right? And again, I don't claim to know, but I do wonder. And I think that it's important to wonder. I think that at the end of the day, you shouldn't question God's validity. But also, whenever you're reading the Bible, from a contextual standpoint, it would be, in my opinion, naive to take it fully literally. Because just from, again, a scientific standpoint, from a knowledge-based standpoint, people didn't know as much then. Right? So their analogies, their metaphors are going to be much, much, much simpler. Right? If we were to write, if all of the events of the Bible, basically to the extent of Jesus being alive and all of that taking place today, and we were to write the Bible, and then thousands and thousands of years later, right, there's a generation like us reading it, the metaphors and the analogies would be way more intense. They would be way more, they would have better vocabulary. Maybe the comparisons would be more scientifically based. Like, for instance, instead of saying that something is of dust, it is, oh, well, this is of a single cellular microbial life form. And maybe it doesn't even need to get into the idea of evolution in itself, but it's just stating it. Right? And at the time, whenever they were writing the Bible, they believed that by saying dust, they were just stating it, because that was the closest thing that they knew. but that's kind of my point on that. I hope that any of this made sense. Like, as I'm saying all of this, I'm like, wow, Spider-Man, like, this is really out there, really controversial. Maybe you shouldn't post this at all. But honestly, recently especially, I've been able to meet, Christians, people who believe in God, people who believe in Christ, that also, ask ourselves, well, it's very, very evident that this isn't 6,000 years old, right? Very, very evident, right? And then a lot of people are like, well, that disproves God, but no. But again, I don't want there to be the notion that you can't basically have both of them together. And I know I keep saying that, but that's really why I'm making this video. Is not because I'm trying to convince anyone, it's just because whenever I look at this as a Christian, trying to understand it, knowing what I know scientifically, and about evolution, and about geology, about geography, about the Earth's natural history, right? It's very, very clear that long processes have been happening, but this is just it for God. I mean, this is just what, it was always this process for him. It's not a long time for him, it's just what it is. So again, I hope any of this made sense, genuinely. And I guess as a closing message, I, really, really challenge all of you. I really do challenge all of you to be the best person that you can be. And I'm being a hypocrite whenever I say that, because we all fall short of that. Right? We go throughout our day and we try to be the best person that we can be. But if I could give you any specific advice, it's just, be kind to people that you see. Anyone, everyone. Acknowledge people. If you see someone, just give them a head nod, just let them know that you see them. Let them know that they're being acknowledged, and obviously do it in safe situations, of course. But yeah, we all of us, all of Gen Z, we want to see change right now. So all that I can say to you, obviously for right now, it's very limited in what we can do, but be that positive change. Be that person who brings hope. Be that person who inspires people. Be that person who inspires people to be more creative, to follow their idea. Be that guy, be that girl, be whoever. Whenever you have a friend talking to you and the friend may say, I have an idea, but I think it's crazy, and you're listening to them and it's an idea that's very personal to them, very creative, don't ever be like, oh, well, that's dumb because you can't see it succeeding, because you're not them, and you'll never be them, and you'll never see things the way that they do. So as opposed to, thinking about yourself, try to incorporate how you can be kinder to others. And if you're already doing that, absolutely amazing. But that's all that I have to say today. So I'll be back on here soon. You guys have a good one.